Hello, students. Today, we are going to understand a very important topic from your economics syllabus, money and credit. We'll be focusing on the different places people can get loans from. Let's begin by thinking about a simple, real-life situation. Imagine you need some money for something important. Who would you go to? Would you think of going to a bank? Or maybe you'd ask a relative or a friend. Just take a moment to think about that.
But here's a bigger question for us to consider. Does everyone in our country really have the same options? Do you think a farmer living in a small village has the same choices as a business owner in a big city? This question is at the very heart of our discussion today as we explore the two different worlds of credit.
So, here's our plan for today. We will follow this structure to understand the topic step by step. We'll start by thinking about loans, then look at the two worlds of credit. We'll explore some real-life stories from a village, understand what a debt trap is, and finally discuss why formal credit is so important.
All right, let's dive into our first section. In India, the sources of credit, that is, the places where people get loans, are broadly divided into two main categories.
We call them the formal sector and the informal sector. Now, they operate very differently from each other. The formal sector includes institutions, like banks and cooperative societies. And the important thing is they are supervised. The informal sector, on the other hand, includes moneylenders, traders, even relatives and friends. And the key difference? It operates without any supervision.
So, let's look closer now at the key features, the rules of the game, you could say, that separate these two sectors.
The formal sources of credit are mainly banks and cooperatives. These are official institutions that are registered and have to follow a set of rules.
And this is the most crucial point. The Reserve Bank of India, or the RBI, supervises their functioning. The RBI acts like a referee, making sure everything is fair. It's there to protect the borrowers and ensure that banks are not just lending to rich people, but also the small farmers and businesses.
The informal sector, on the other hand, is made up of individuals or small groups that the borrower usually knows personally. It could be the village moneylender, a local trader, an employer, or even your own relatives.
And here is the key word to remember: unregulated. There is no organization like the RBI to supervise their lending activities. This can create a lot of risks for the person taking the loan, the borrower.
This table brilliantly illustrates the differences. Regulation, supervised by the RBI in the formal sector, not supervised at all in the informal. Interest rates, generally lower in the formal sector, but often much higher in the informal. Collateral, which is a kind of security, is usually required by banks. And most importantly, for the borrower, safety is high in the formal sector, but very low in the informal sector.
To understand the real-world impact of all this, let's visit a village called Sonpur and meet three different people. Their stories will make this very clear. First, we meet Arun. He is a medium farmer and he has 7 acres of land. Because he has land to offer as security or collateral, he is able to get a loan from a bank, a formal source. Notice his interest rate. It's a low 8.5% per year.
Next is Shamal. He is a small farmer. He has to borrow from a trader, which is an informal source. Now, his interest rate is 3% per month. That might not sound like a lot, but if you calculate it for the whole year, it comes to a very high 36%. A big difference from Arun's loan, isn't it?
And finally, this is Rama. She is a landless agricultural laborer. She has no land, which means she has no collateral, so her only option for a loan is her employer, another informal source.
Now look at her interest rate. It's 5% per month. If we calculate that for the year, it's a staggering 60%. 60% per year. Remember, Arun's was just 8.5%. This huge difference is what can push a person into a very difficult situation.
You see, Rama's story shows us a very dangerous cycle that many people can fall into. This is known as a debt trap. So what exactly is a debt trap? It's a situation from which recovery is very painful. It's when a borrower has to take out new loans just to repay their old ones. The debt keeps growing and growing, and it becomes a cycle that is very difficult to escape. Let's look at the cycle of Rama's debt. She needs credit for her daily expenses. She borrows from her employer at that very high interest rate. Now, her wages are not enough to repay that loan, so she is forced to take a fresh loan, which just increases her total debt. As you can see, the high interest rate means she can never fully repay her loan, forcing her to borrow again and again.
So the crucial point is this: why do poor households depend so much on this informal credit? Well, a big reason is the lack of collateral, like we saw with Rama. They don't have land or property to offer as security.
Also, providing all the documents that banks need can be very difficult, and sometimes banks are just not present in rural areas. Informal lenders are easily accessible, it's true, but we must remember, just because something is easily available, it doesn't mean it is better.
This brings us to our final section. Why is it so important for our country's development to have more formal credit available to everyone? Let's look at the big picture.
Now, what's really interesting here is this data. It shows that for poor households, more than half of their loans come from expensive informal sources. But if you look at rich households, it's the complete opposite. A massive 83% of their loans come from cheaper, formal sources like banks. This shows us a very clear inequality.
So, the conclusion is clear. For people to start small businesses, for farmers to grow their crops, and to improve their incomes, access to cheap and affordable credit from banks and cooperatives is absolutely essential.
So to summarize our lesson, I will leave you with this important question. For your exams, think about it. Why is it necessary to expand the formal sources of credit in India? Try to use all the points we have discussed today to build your answer. Thank you.